mainstreaming accessibility considerations into their project components, into their activities, so that persons with disabilities have equal opportunities to participate and gain from development outcomes, development benefits. But obviously, there may be areas where persons with disabilities face some specific gaps. So, for example, since we're thinking about digital inclusion, we may design digital services to be universally accessible. However, there will be persons with disabilities who require access to assistive technology devices to even be able to meaningfully use those digital services. So we do want our project teams to, and our government clients, to think thoughtfully about what may be some specific constraints, some specific gaps, some specific even skills deficits that persons with disabilities face, and to also ensure that they're taking into account this twin track approach to address those gaps. And, and this is just, Charlotte talked about the opening remarks and opening session of COSP 15 yesterday. And there was a lot of conversation about how this is a progressive journey. We have to acknowledge that sometimes we have to take small steps, different steps to really achieve universal access or full inclusion. So we are committed to supporting our government partners on that journey. Going forward, we have an excellent panel that's actually going to talk about how they make these projects accessible. I spoke about the notes, and we have varied actions. Not only you take different actions to make components inclusive, but you also monitor. So we are certainly pushing the inclusion of monitoring indicators very specific to persons with disabilities or disaggregated by disability, so we actually understand the downstream impact of our projects. I will very briefly mention some knowledge products that our team has been developing over the years to support our colleagues, to support our government partners, to support our development partners, and of course, provide them as resources to civil society. On digital inclusion in 2016, so it's been a few years, but in 2016, we worked to develop a background paper, which was linked to the World Development Report on digital dividends. And this paper has been, I have a photo of the front page on the slide there, but this paper has been quite influential and triggering this idea that we cannot actually have digital inclusion without very systematically considering the access gaps for persons with disabilities. Very recently, earlier this year, our team also launched, with funding from the Inclusive Education Initiative, a landscape review of ICT for disability inclusive education. And in that report, we both look at what is the status currently of educational technology, but we've also looked at some of the gaps that occurred during remote learning in COVID-19 and offer some recommendations. Moving on to my last slide, and again, in preparation for the remarks still to come, in jobs and economic transformation, again, because of the IDA 19 commitments on JET, we've actually moved to support teams with some very practical guidance internally. So again, we have developed a short, very action-oriented brief for task teams who may be new to this subject on really how to think through different components. This action-oriented guidance is actually supported by a very lengthy technical guidance where we really go into detail on barriers that persons with disabilities face in their economic life cycle, and how we address those. I have up on the screen the front page of policy note that we developed, policy recommendations on accelerating inclusive employment for persons with disabilities in Bangladesh. And this is just an example of how we are also providing support for country-specific policy dialogue and engagement. I would now like to turn over to my task team colleagues to really give you very operational examples of what it is that they do to achieve this. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dipti, for providing an excellent snapshot of the various products we've developed and how they support implementation. I would like to now invite George Nulanga and Wilson Munyeze to share with us the work that they're doing in Rwanda on inclusive digital development. Over to you.
Thank you, Charlotte. I hope you can hear me well.
We can.
So yes, I am a brown African man in my early 40s with short black hair, and I'm putting on a dark blue trouser with a striped white and gray shirt. So that's the way I'm dressed, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Now, I'll quickly introduce the project on digital acceleration for Rwanda, and then give an opportunity to my colleague Wilson, who is also with us here, to speak to some of the things that we have done. Now, the digital acceleration project is a 200 million operation, and IDA allocation is 100 million. We have co-financing from the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank with another 100 million. And the project development objective is to increase access to broadband and selected digital public services and strengthening the digital innovation ecosystem. This project became effective March this year. It's a 5-year operation, and it has 4 components. And among these 4 components, component 1 is focused on digital access and inclusion, and this is where the team has done a lot of work in terms of disability inclusion. The team has leveraged this component to make sure that the 4 subcomponents ensure disability inclusion, and one of the subcomponents for component 1 relates to access to affordable smart devices. The other subcomponent relates to digital literacy for all, and then we have another subcomponent on last mile connectivity, and then legal and regulatory framework. Component 2 focuses on digital public service delivery, where we have a subcomponent on digital ID. So in that component, we have also addressed issues of the needs of the disabled. We have also another component on digital innovation and entrepreneurship, and the last component is on project management. So that is the 4 components of this digital acceleration project. And Wilson will just go through quickly one slide that we have prepared, focusing on areas that the project has capitalized to really be inclusive when it comes to disability. So over to you, Wilson, to take us through.
Thank you very much, George. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Wilson Muyenzi. I am a Black African man. I'm wearing a light yellow shirt and sporting a small bald over there. It's a pleasure to be with you in this very important session. I'm going to talk about very briefly what the strategy of digital inclusion we have in the Rwanda Digital Acceleration Project. This is a new project, as George just mentioned. We are now only taking off. We're only starting or commencing implementation. But during the design, we deliberately included many of the things that Deepti talked about, and came up with a strategy that is based on 3 key pillars. Number 1 is a pillar that we call integrated approach. So I'll talk briefly about that. The second is targeted focus, very deliberate about who we are targeting when it comes to disability inclusion. But finally, inclusive M&E, we realize that it all has to be anchored on some data. So we also have a key pillar on inclusive monitoring and evaluation for the project going forward. Now, it's very difficult to mention what we plan to do or what we have in the design of the project in a few minutes that we have, but I'll quickly talk about these 3 key pillars. So we deliberately, as I said, tried to ensure through discussions with our colleagues, of course, from the experts in disability inclusion, we really engaged them during the project design and tried to include disability sensitive approaches in the key subcomponents that George mentioned, the devices, digital skills, and others. So that we have we try to address the disability inclusion as much as we can. So really integrated in every subcomponent where it is feasible. You will find that we integrated disability sensitive approaches for everything that we want to do, from smartphone devices to skills to services, digital services, etc., etc. So that's really one key pillar. The second pillar is targeted focus. So we have specific targets in terms of what we want, who we want to reach. So that is not just a blanket. Now, of course, let me mention a caveat here, which is that we are currently in the feasibility study, because we want everything to be based on a comprehensive study. So the feasibility study is going to give us the current practices, the current landscape in terms of digital for disability inclusion, so that we even tailor our inputs based on evidence on the ground. So the digital inclusion and digital service delivery components that George talked about, component 1 and component 2 of the project, have specific quotas, disability quotas, that were assigned for targeting. So for instance, we are going to try and make smartphones affordable to many Rwandans. So this is not just people with disabilities, but people who are disadvantaged in terms of affordability, in terms of many other disadvantages that they had, rural area, people from the rural areas, etc. So when we launch this scheme for affordable and smart and accessible smartphones, we will include specific quota for people with disabilities. So that is part of the focus. Number 2, as part of the project, we're going to provide digital literacy training for 3 million Rwandans. Now, we're not just going to target 3 million Rwandans. We have specific quotas: females, people with disabilities, etc. So we have this already as a focus, as a target in the project. We also have digital services. The project is going to try and improve on the digital government or digital public service delivery in Rwanda. And as part of this, we have things like the digital ID, but also other services that are accessible online. So we will specifically target people with disabilities when it comes to devices, for instance, access-enabled devices for the various services, because every service has a certain way of reach. These public services are designed and delivered, including people with disabilities as part of the recipients or the beneficiaries. So briefly, I'm trying to be very, very quick here, but so briefly, that's what I can say also on the targeted focus, so that we don't just roll out blindly, but with a specific target. Finally, we want to support the National Council of Persons with Disabilities in Rwanda, but also other NGOs and a few other agencies that are very active in promoting disability inclusion, to try and strengthen the collection, analysis, and dissemination of evidence-based data. So we're going to improve and strengthen the M&E system for disability programs in Rwanda, working with the ministry responsible, but also the council and other key stakeholders. Right. We will start, of course, by taking stock of disability data in the different surveys that are always done in Rwanda, to make sure that we sort of verify and confirm all these and sort of make them up to date, so that in the 5 years that the project is going to run, we have a very clear baseline moving forward. And then finally, my time is up. Finally, we are going to sort of promote the disaggregation of data where feasible for target beneficiaries. We still see this as a challenge from our interactions during the project design. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wilson. I'm sorry to kind of rush you on this, but thank you both, George and Wilson, for giving us some insights into the Rwanda Digital Development Project. We are running a bit behind time. So now what I'd like to do is to invite Shiro Nakata and Muksur Rahman to share with us their work on jobs and economic transformation in Bangladesh. Over to you both.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. I am Mukhlis Rahman. You can call me Mukhlis. I'm a South Asian man and the early 60s. So you can see a red tie also. What we like to highlight that say the inclusive challenges for Bangladesh. Could you please go to the next slide? The overall the job market, you know that the relevance of the training is still not up to the level. And the TVET graduate, the social recognition is still lagging behind. And female participation is low and it is increasing. And accessibility remained a question as most of the Tibetan institutions established mid-90s, 1990s. And there are evidence shortage and data not available as we are expecting for knowledge work. Next slide, please. What Bangladesh actually did. Bangladesh Constitution, which adopted in 1972, that actually, there is no discrimination. And Bangladesh is the one of the country which actually ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And law also enacted and implementation is progressing, and community level disability inclusiveness and service level equipment also providing, and different trust also established by the government for providing technical support. Next, please. There is a skills development policy which was actually initially prepared in 2010. Further, it is upgraded in 2020. And I would like to say that you can see 5% of the enrollment in technical and vocational education kept for the disabled persons. And accessibility is a question, but the government is taking enough steps for making the facility is easily accessible for the persons with disabilities. And curriculum and reading materials and the digital devices are making. And you know, Bangladesh also a major country for garments exported. And we are working with other institutions for providing them adequate jobs. And in situ training at the industry level also going on. Bangladesh also established a Bangladesh Business Disability Network, which is providing critical support all over the country. Still, it is at the initial stage. We need to provide support for that so that it will provide meaningful support to the persons with disabilities. And you know that Bangladesh is now elevating to the higher middle income country. And as far as DG target, also government is trying to address and involve all the persons with disabilities in the productive sector. I would like to request my colleague Shiro Nakata for talking specifically on the project. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. Thanks very much, Mukhlis, and good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everybody wherever you are. My name is Shiro Nakata. I'm a senior economist at the World Bank, and I'm an East Asian man with short hair, with short black hair and black eyes. And today I'm wearing a white shirt and wearing a big smile on my face. So, and thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about the project that we are undertaking in Bangladesh. Can you go to the next slide, please? The project name is called The Asset, and we have a number of features in the project that try to promote the inclusiveness for the disadvantaged population, including the people with disabilities. And I'd like to just touch upon a couple of, at the overall level, a couple of the key features that we have in the project. The first of all, on the bank team side, this is actually the cross-team collaboration, cross-global practice team collaboration. So we are from the education team, but we also have a co-detail from the social development team, a team of the DPT, and who knows tons about how to access those disabled people with the disabilities. Now, another part, the second part is that if you look at the project development objectives, we have a specific reference to this inclusive agenda. We have tried to make our skills training program as inclusive as possible, aligned with the government policy, as Mokles mentioned, that the 5% threshold is there. That's the government target. So we want the project to help them achieve that target. So in the project development objective, we have specific reference that is including women and the other disadvantaged population. And disadvantaged population, we mean that people from the ethnic minority background and also people with disabilities. The third main feature we have is also something related to what the DPT mentioned, that is the PDO level indicators. So we have four PDO level indicators, and out of 4, the 2 of those indicators are actually disaggregated to include, specifically track the achievement for the people with disabilities. So we have an PDO indicator on the number of trainees trained, number of trainees with disability trained, and also we have a PDO indicator to look at the graduates' employment. This is also disaggregated for the trainees with disabilities. So the idea is that we not only want to increase the number of people with disability trained, but also we like to make sure that they are also meaningfully employed after being trained. So those are the key sort of overall level design feature that we have introduced in the project. So can we go to the next slide, please? So these are some of the most of the components actually has at least some features that try to actually enhance the enrollment of the trainees with disabilities in the training program. So the component number 1, actually we deal with the long-term and short-term formal training programs, and we provide grants to the institution, competitive grants to the institutions. And one of the priority and key priority area is the investment on the facilities to enhance the accessibility and universal access for the trainees with disabilities. And the second component, we work with the private industries to support them to expand the industry-based training programs. Over there also, we have this priority and the selection criteria that looks at how they actually propose to enhance the accessibility for the trainees with disabilities. And over here, as Mokles mentioned, we have a strong partnership with the Bangladesh Business and Disability Network, which is like an NGO type of organization in Bangladesh, very powerful. So we have a strong partnership with them, and they will help us to actually increase the awareness among the employers about the importance of skilling and also employing those the people, youth with disabilities. So with that, let me hand it back over to the moderators. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shiro and Muksor. It's really good to hear about the work that's going on in terms of the country operations and how the technical knowledge products are supporting these operations, which is really very important. So without further ado, I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Mari Koistinen. And Mari will provide us with an overview of disaster risk management operations at the World Bank. Over to you, Mari.
Thank you, Charlotte. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I am Mari Koistinen, a Senior Social Development Specialist at the World Bank, and I'm part of the World Bank Disability Inclusion team. I'm a white woman with light short brown hair with green eyes. Today I'm wearing a white shirt and hanging earrings. So I'm very happy to share this section focusing on disability inclusion in disasters with my colleague Naraya. I will provide some general background information on our focus on disability inclusive disaster risk management, DRM, and on the type of support we are providing for our teams, while Narae focuses on practical implementation of our commitment on this important topic. Disasters and climate hazards are becoming more frequent, interconnected, and severe. Disasters' impacts are dependent on pre-existing conditions and underlying risk factors, including access to resources, the availability of social networks and support, and levels of participation in community life. The more an individual or group is excluded from society, the greater the disaster impact will be. Simply, disasters affect some people more than others, and many of those unreasonably affected are persons with disabilities. Next slide, please. So as we know, there are numerous international policy frameworks available to guide effective implementation of disability inclusive DRM. Among them, as are shown on the slide through icons, are the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Sendai Framework, and the Disability Charter. These frameworks can provide robust support for disability inclusion, yet translating them into practice requires more work and funding. So, as all my colleagues have already mentioned, disability inclusion is also part of several World Bank commitments. Among them is our commitment on disaster risk management, which ensures that all reconstruction projects apply principles of universal access in post-disaster settings. So, what has the bank done to implement these commitments? Next slide, please. So, first of all, we do regular awareness raising on the topic through, for example, blogs and different kinds of events. We offer tailored technical assistance and training to our teams on different aspects of disability inclusion, focusing, for example, on disability inclusive data, which is core also in disaster situations. So I'm very happy to share that this year we launched an e-learning course on disability inclusive data. This course is available both for all World Bank staff and for our development partners worldwide. My colleagues are sharing links in the chat box to these products I'm mentioning. Thank you so much. So accessibility is another cross-cutting topic that concerns all sectors of society, including disaster contexts. It has different implications on the lives of persons with disabilities, but also concerns other groups such as older people, persons with temporary injuries, children, pregnant women, and so on. So in order to address the importance of this topic, the World Bank launched a technical note on accessibility, a document that is intended as a compendium of useful and practical information about accessibility to be used by World Bank teams, but also by our partners, civil society organizations, organizations of persons with disability, and other stakeholders. The note consists of 4 parts, providing information on accessibility entry points in the project cycle, but also sectoral and technical guidance, focusing, for example, on water, transport, digital development, and infrastructure. This product will be available also in French and in Spanish and in plain language. And in order to roll out this note, we have already organized 13 training sessions within the bank for our colleagues during this year, and the work will continue. Our teams have also created additional technical guidance notes, focusing not only on disaster risk management, but also on post-disaster reconstruction. Post-disaster recovery presents an opportunity to build back better and to reduce the underlying factors that contribute to risks in disasters. So we do hope that all these materials will be very useful for our staff, but also for our partners to ensure that the future is truly inclusive also in disasters. So I finish here. Thank you so much. And back to you, Charlotte.
Thank you very much, Mari, for a very clear sense of what's going on in terms of our DRM approach, and emphasizing that the point that has been made a lot over the last day or so at the Conference of State Parties, that persons with disabilities face heightened risk and vulnerability at each stage of disaster. And so we don't want to lose sight of that. I would now like to invite our colleague, Narei Choi. And Narei is going to provide us with an operational example of DRM. Over to you, Narei.
Thank you, Charlotte. Hello, everyone. My name is Narei Choi. I'm a senior urban development specialist at the World Bank. I'm an East Asian woman with a medium-length brownish hair, and also wearing today a blue dress with some, sparkling necklaces. As introduced by Mari and others, the World Bank's commitment to disability inclusive development includes a commitment that is directly relevant to disaster risk management. Currently, it is really focused on post-disaster interventions in public facilities. But as Charlotte just mentioned, disability inclusion entry points really cuts across the whole spectrum of disaster risk management, or DRM, interventions, ranging from risk assessment, reduction, preparedness, financial protection to recovery and reconstruction. You can move to the next slide, which actually shows the whole spectrum of entry points that have emerged from actual World Bank DRM operations and interventions or initiatives, which have been supported by the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, called GFDR in short. And these are really concrete examples of actions that can be thought through across the cycle. But at today's presentation, I will highlight a few examples just to give you more insights into what can be done in actual World Bank financed project context. The first one is actually a global program called Building Reforms. You can move to the next slide, please. Building Regulatory Reform Program, which is also supported by GFDRR. And the program supports regulatory reforms regarding improving resilience, energy efficiency, accessibility of building infrastructure in the World Bank's client countries by providing technical assistance as well as capacity development of the government and also the industry, as well as homeowners, because we are really looking at residential buildings as well as other buildings to really strengthen various aspects of building infrastructure, including accessibility. So by providing a really integrated approach to achieving all these goals together through regulatory reforms, including universal design standards and principles in the regulations and policies, and also providing incentives to really implement these standards. The program, BRR program, is really aimed at enhancing the strength of the institutional environment towards accessibility as well as resilience and energy efficiency. This is a programmatic approach, which is one example. And the second example is from Sri Lanka, from the Climate Resilience Multi-Phase Program. And it's a multi-phase program, and its first phase really focuses on building inclusive early warning and community emergency preparedness in general. As you can see, there are many challenges around sort of developing or establishing inclusive early warning system, revolving sort of the limited trust in the system and the use of personal information, as well as sort of continuing to manage and update the system, etc. But despite these challenges, the program really applied an incremental approach towards inclusive EWS, or early warning system, and preparedness. The first, they really try to understand, please move to the next slide, And first, they tried to understand the actual experiences and barriers of local communities, including persons with disabilities. And building on that, they really tried to learn from good practices from around the world through a very insightful and engaging study tour to New Orleans. And they gained a lot of insights from the experiences by the New Orleans government and also communities. And based on these learning experiences, they develop and define some key principles and actions for the program itself. And this really, this step-by-step foundational work and then preparation really enable the program to translate some of the concepts and principles into interventions that are supported under the World Bank Finance Project. The third and last example is from Nepal, and it's from the Nepal's post-earthquake housing construction project. So for building or rebuilding houses after earthquake, the team realized that it is important to meet various needs of local communities, including persons with disabilities. And in doing so, the reality on the ground was that the inhabitants in rural areas actually rely a lot on local masons for housing and construction works. So it became really evident that engaging these local masons and improving their understanding of the concept of disabilities and need for accessibility is critical for the success of the program. So the project has really provided a training program for masons, adopting this training of trainers or TOT model, whereby field engineers are trained to deliver further training on universal access to the local masons. Next slide, please. Through these efforts, the project has delivered master TOT, training of trainers, and also other TOTs, and training nearly 150 engineers, even during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the project has also prepared various training manual for engineers, handbook for masons, and accessibility manual for house owners so that they can also improve accessibility of their own houses. In addition to training, in this process of support, various assessments were conducted to identify the accessibility needs and also complementary support needs on livelihoods and assistance devices. So these are a few selected examples showcasing how disability inclusion can be incorporated into the World Bank DRM operations. And we really hope to mainstream disability inclusion further as we continue to contribute to disability inclusive development, including DRM and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Nare, for a great showcase of how DRM can be operationalized across country operations. And we have a couple of questions in the chat box, but in the interest of time, what we'd like to do is we will gather all the questions and we will respond individually to the people that have posed the questions. And that way we can really do justice to those questions. So please keep the questions coming and we will make sure that responses are provided in that regard. So I think we've had some really interesting, thought-provoking discussions from our panelists. And right now, I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Jenny Leigh Fleury. And Jenny is the Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft. And she will join us via a video message to highlight the importance of bridging the disability divide and how we can work together to do so.
Hi there, I'm Jenny Leigh Fleury, the Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft. And we're focused right now on how we can bridge the disability divide. This was a phrase actually first coined by the World Bank in 2016 to explain and, well, put a frame to the social inequities that exist for people with disabilities across multiple frames, from employment to education to justice to more. Disability is a huge and growing demographic. We've just gone through a mass disabling event. In fact, we're still in the middle of it. That's grown the base of people with disabilities. But do we really know to what degree? Understanding the base of disability is crucial. if not essential, for us to really get our arms around the problem and to build the right connections and partnerships to tackle it. That's why we are so thrilled, excited to partner with World Bank, to follow their lead in helping to put our arms around the demographics in a more strategic, long-term way. The disability divide has been a reality for decades, maybe longer, maybe centuries. Working together, following the lead of organizations like World Bank, and putting in some of our nerdery, some of our technology to help, we think can make a difference. So thank you, and I'm excited to see what comes of this. Let's tackle that disability divide together. Bye.
Thank you very much, Jenny. And I mean, first of all, your remarks are extremely encouraging, but we're also really excited to be working with Microsoft to begin to tackle this digital divide that you mentioned. So I really want to thank everybody for joining us today. This has been truly an informative session. I want to thank all the task team leaders from the bank that have joined from across the world to share with us some insights in terms of what they're doing to ensure that disability inclusive development becomes a core part of their development programming. I would also, of course, like to thank our sign language interpreters and to say that what's been really important about this discussion is that we have tried to maintain the core tenets of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in the work that we do. So Meninda talked about accountability and mentioned that there are in place systems and structures where persons with disabilities can engage directly to the bank around projects and whether projects are in fact reaching persons with disabilities. We have technical notes and guidance that we've developed to bolster the thinking around how to operationalize disability inclusion in our projects. And then, of course, we heard from our colleagues what we've been doing in various select countries to mainstream disability inclusive development. And I think one of the underlining pieces that has been mentioned all along has been that we are working to ensure that the voice and the agency of persons with disabilities is a central part of the work that we do. So I'd like to thank you all very much for joining. For those that asked questions, please leave your email address in the chat box and we will make sure that we respond to them in due time. So thank you all very, very much. And it's been a great pleasure. I hope you enjoy the rest of COSP. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte.